So, Marcus, what do you think? Should we start or should we still wait?
We have people coming in all the time. 38 now. We should have some pause music. Can you sing?
I think I leave it up to you to sing. You're the comedian, so.
Exactly. Notably not the singer.
Oh, sole mio. That's my contribution.
We got people contributing. This is good.
Take care because there are judgy Italians here.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Yes, so we are in Switzerland, so we are starting on time, but usually it's like either CT or ST, so we can wait for 15 minutes.
We'll be fine. See, one person every half a minute is coming in. This is good stuff.
Yeah, looks good.
All right, 42 people in the house. This is good. This is the part of the show where I would usually warm up the audience by asking some inappropriate questions to them, but I think this is not that kind of show.
But I could share my slides. What about that?
Come on, we're setting up the best joke of the whole thing.
I can do that. Actually, you gave me permission, so I'll make a
good idea.
I'll set an example.
Yes, let's go for that. Let's go for that, Sabina. It's so beautiful.
Okay. Yes, I know. Do you see it?
Yes,
I think so.
Yes, we can see the screen, Sabina.
Yeah. How do you like it?
That's good.
Very nice, but I can only see it in English. I would love to have all this welcome in different languages, but
oh, that's true. You are right. I didn't realize that. So I think I'll speak with PMI Switzerland.
Because we definitely need to improve this slide.
To make it more.
This one is worth keeping.
It's nice. I'm not saying it's not nice. At the first sight, looks like it's in different languages, but at the end, you look closely and said, welcome, welcome, welcome. Understand.
I completely agree with you. It could be actually in different languages that would be more interesting and more welcoming. But our presentations are in English, so that's why I think they chose to stick to that language. So, Marcus, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm happy to get started. I think 5 minutes is a good time to get started. 48 people on the chat. That's good.
Okay, so I'll start actually with our first virtual Zoom event organized by PMI Switzerland. And my name is Sabina Tatur, and I will be your host tonight. We actually should have around 100 attendees. I'm not sure anymore how many there are right now, but what we would be interested in, where you all come from. So if you want, you can write in your chat where you're currently located, where you are joining our event from. So please go ahead and we will have a look. And maybe Marcus, you can, because I just right now, since I'm sharing my screen, I don't see the chat. But maybe you can.
Yeah, we have Nyon, Basel, Lucerne, Lausanne, Bern, Zug, Tennessee, look at that.
Wow, that's great.
Fribourg, so going away, so Blonay, I don't know where that even is. And yeah, it's a good mix of people.
Okay, oh, that's wonderful. It seems to be
France.
really, we have people from all around the world, it looks like.
Turkey,
So I'm very excited about that. Okay, so before we start, let me quickly point out some activities of the PMI Switzerland chapter. So last year, our social good team hosted a workshop for the World Federation of United Nations Associations with the support of the PMI Educational Foundation. They taught around 20 youth participants project management skills that they later applied for their assigned action program. The team also organized project management workshops at schools and universities and reached out to young graduates at the career days in Switzerland. I would also like to mention our mentor program. This program brings together our chapter members in mentoring partnerships and supports the professional development of young project managers. If you are interested to participate in this program, either as mentor or as mentee, please contact the PMI chapter in Switzerland, of course. So all these activities and programs are organized and run by volunteers who donate their time to make the PMI Switzerland chapter a vibrant community. And last but not least, all this is made possible by our sponsors, and we would like to extend our thanks to them. So before we start, a short overview of today's agenda. So in a moment, we will start with tonight's highly anticipated presentation, how to communicate better in virtual project teams. During this session, all participants will be muted and the chat will be turned off. So if you have a problem right now and you would like to share it with us, please do it right now. So after the presentation, we will have a question and answer session during which the microphones and the chat option will be accessible for everyone to ask questions. And after some closing words, our tonight's speaker, Marcus, is inviting everyone to join him to an informal open discussion. So please stay with us and don't leave immediately after the official event is over. We hope for a dynamic discussion about our virtual times. So please be aware that the session is being recorded and we will publish this event on the PMI Switzerland YouTube channel. And now let me say a few words about our presenter, Marcus Seppele. Marcus is a speaker and stand-up comedian, and many of you will remember him as the host of the PMI Swiss Chapter annual membership meeting in February. Before going into speaking and comedy full-time, Marcus worked for 13 years in executive compensation strategy at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, Syngenta, Actelion, and Johnson & Johnson. Marcus is a two-time TEDx speaker and producer and a 5-time Swiss champion of public speaking. So in today's workshop, Marcus will lead us through some best practices for communicating in virtual project teams. So let me hand over to Marcus.
All right, thank you very much, Sabina. I'm gonna go ahead and, there we go. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to today's session about how to communicate better in virtual teams. This is at least the official naming of the event, but what the topic actually is how to make virtual communication less terrible. A big chunk of it today is going to be about virtual meetings, but that's not only the topic. And these virtual communication tools, many of them are new to some of us, but I've actually been using Zoom since 2015. So that means that I've seen a lot of terrible online meetings. So hopefully by the end of this session, you're going to have some new tools in your toolbox to make your online communication a little bit better than it is today. In the main part of this presentation, I'm going to go through 3 different topics. The first one is about virtual teams in general, so not even anything to do with meetings. Just virtual teams in general and what are the challenges that we face in virtual project teams. In the second block, I'm going to look at virtual meetings and what are the kind of leadership and communication behaviors that you can use to make them a little bit more inclusive, a little bit more engaging. And then finally, I have a little block about the value of using video in your meetings. And as Sabina said, we'll do a Q&A after that. I'm going to come back with the summary and highlight some of the things that you may have noticed or may not have noticed. So this prepared presentation is about 20, 25 minutes, something like that. And then we'll go 10 minutes Q&A and 5 minutes close. And this is actually what I would ask for your help, because I'm not only going to talk about how to make a great interactive session, I want to make this an interactive session. So for those of you who have the possibility to turn on your video, I would appreciate if you were to do that, because the interactive blocks that we're going to do here is I'm going to ask you a couple of questions every now and again. And my favorite way of asking questions on a Zoom meeting is for you to raise your hand. So if you are interested in participating in the polling questions to kind of tailor this a little bit to what you guys actually go through in your day-to-day life, please turn on your video, so long as you're comfortable with it. And if you have a dog in the background, this is not a problem. If you have a cat in the background, this is not a problem at all. We like having the little cats and dogs. So very happy with that. One thing I am going to do here, I'm just going to make sure that everybody is muted. And if we can always unmute when we do the Q&A. Okay, now I'm happy to see so many people on the screen. This also gives me a nicer kind of opportunity to look at you guys. I'm very happy that you guys volunteer. So chat is closed, as we talked about, and let's move right into the topic of challenges in virtual presentations. And I'd first like to refer to a study that came out in 2016, actually sponsored by PMI, where they looked at what are the main challenges in working with virtual teams. So this was obviously before the pandemic, but I think you can probably relate to many of them. The top answer in terms of the challenges that these project management professionals gave was engaging with remote participants. Number two, so that was actually picked by more than 2/3 of the respondents. Number two was missing on the dynamics and the nuances of conversations. Number 3 and 4 are a little bit similar. They're working across time zones, working across different cultures. And number 5 is building trust. Building trust in your project team was cited by more than half of the participants in the survey. And the last one is monitoring that work gets done. And if you look at those reasons, those challenges, most of them, actually 5 of those 6, are not really related to the work itself, not really related to delivering on the project, but rather to communication. So as these were the problems that we had already before the pandemic, before all the home office, I think that some of these have become more current for all of us. And that actually leads me to the first poll that I'm going to do. And for everybody who is on video, you can participate in the poll just by raising your hand. So the first question is, if you are working from your home office at the moment, please raise your hand. All right, that is almost everybody working from home office. Very, very good. Second question is, if you think of the virtual, the time before the pandemic, let's take it 1 year ago. Were you working in virtual project teams already back before the pandemic? Please raise your hand if you work in virtual teams. There we go. As I expected, a lot of people working in virtual teams. And if you think 1 year into the future, what do you think? If you think there's going to be an increase in the use of virtual teams, please raise your hand. Excellent. It sounds like a very unanimous feeling that virtual working, remote working, and virtual teams, they're really here to stay. And I certainly believe that this is a trend that was already in place beforehand, and pandemic or not, this is something that's going to accelerate. And I actually saw a study that came out on Monday this week this was from S&P Global Market Intelligence, where they polled a number of companies in different industries about their work from home policies. And one of the key findings was that 2/3 of the companies believe that work from home policies are going to be permanent, or at least be there in the long term. So that was the plan. So I think we can only benefit from getting better at this virtual communication. And this is the reason why we're doing the workshop today. Now, many of those challenges that we talked about, we're not going to be able to solve all of them on today's call, but I think there are some aspects of communication that we can use to improve all of our project management experience in this area. So I'm going to go through a number of techniques as we go through. The first thing that I want to mention, though, is that it's very difficult to find a one-size-fits-all when it comes to a communication strategy. And each individual team member, each individual team, they're going to have different preferences as to how do they want to communicate. And one thing that I've seen in the past, this was back at Syngenta, we actually had a communication framework for the team. And this is something that I recommend you do, where you actually address things like, how are we going to communicate in this team? Are we going to do online meetings? Are we going to do email? Are we going to do Slack? Or do we post on TikTok? What are we going to do? And one of the most powerful things for me was the email section. I mean, how do you write email subject lines that are actually easy to use? And my favorite thing ever was writing something like action by July 5, so that the recipient knows that they have to do something. So even before we talk about virtual meetings, I think it's important to have an understanding, some kind of agreement about a communication framework in your team, because people do have different expectations, people have different preferences. So putting that together is actually a good exercise. It's not only a good exercise because the product is useful, but it's also a great team building exercise, because you're asking people, how would you actually prefer to do it, and what are your best ideas? So this is my first recommendation for virtual communication and project teams. And certainly don't assume that everybody likes emails. Don't assume that everybody likes online meetings, but make sure that you ask. So for the next few minutes, next few blocks here, I would like to talk about virtual meetings specifically. And I hope that you might agree with me that virtual meetings are terrible for the same reasons that physical meetings can be terrible. Things like there's no agenda, half of the people, they don't need to be in the meeting, nobody's in charge, and 2 people are doing all the talking when there's 15 people in the meeting. But I think with virtual meetings, we have some additional problems. And the biggest one in my mind is that it's so easy to tune out. It's so easy to go do something else on your computer when you're in a virtual team. So we're going to look at some methods of increasing that engagement. And one of the reasons why it's easy to tune out and why it's easy to disengage is because we don't have those visual cues. When you're in a physical meeting room, you can tell if people are distracted or stressed or preoccupied, or if they're engaged, if they're asking questions, because we don't have those visual cues, the challenges are very, very different. But then we have the biggest problem of all when it comes to virtual meetings is that somebody goes and does this. Somebody shares their screen. And when somebody shares their screen, this is the worst possible outcome of all. Now, slides are often terrible as they are, but in a virtual meeting, they are much, much worse. The number one way to disengage your participants in a virtual meeting is by showing them a slide. And one of the most important things is that it takes up the whole screen. Even now that I'm sharing it, I don't see any of you on the display that I'm doing. And even on my backup PC, I don't see anybody else but the slide. An incredibly effective way to disengage your participants is to share a screen. So I'm actually going to stop that screen sharing now because it's such a terrible thing. And the point that I want to make is the following. Probably many of you started reading that slide, though I gave you no indication that there was anything interesting on that slide at all. And I can assure you there was nothing of value on that slide at all, right? But people tend to read it anyway. So just by putting on the slide, you are immediately disengaging a big portion of the people. Just like in a physical meeting, also in a virtual meeting, people cannot read and listen at the same time. So you as the meeting leader, you have to decide what are we going to do? Are we going to read or are we going to listen? So here's my recommendation when it comes to sharing screens and slides in particular. Never use slides in online meetings unless you can justify it. And here's my principle when it comes to slide in a physical meeting. For every slide that you have in your deck, you should be able to say the following. On this slide, I would like to show you X. And if you cannot articulate which thing you would like to show people on the slide, then the slide should not be there. If you cannot actively refer to the slide, then the slide should not be there. And I think this is great practice also in virtual meetings, especially because it takes up the whole thing. Another extension of this is that once you have shown the slide, remove it. If it takes 1 minute to grasp the information there, don't leave it there for 15 minutes. In so many meetings, we have this assumption that there always needs to be a slide on the screen, but this is absolutely not the case. And the final thing I want to point out about virtual meetings is that if you're in a physical meeting and somebody has a slide on the screen all the time beside them or above them, wherever it may be, it is possible to ignore it. You can just look at the person instead of looking at the slide. In an online meeting, you cannot do this. So don't monopolize the attention of your participants by using slides. Now, I could talk for an hour about how much I hate slides. I could also talk an hour about how to make great slides, but I'm going to move over to the next topic here, which is not slide related. And that topic is actually a next poll, because here's the thing. You have, as somebody who leads online meetings, somebody who leads teams, you have an opportunity to actually improve these online meetings and this online communication. You have a unique opportunity as the meeting leader. So let me do a next poll here. If you are typically the meeting leader when it comes to your meetings, please raise your hand. Okay, that's almost everybody is typically the meeting leader. How about another question? Is there always a meeting leader in your meetings? Not so many hands, right? Not so many hands. And this is actually going to be my next point, is that in any kind of meeting, I believe it's important to have one person in charge. And it is already important in physical meetings, but in virtual meetings, it's so much more important to have one person in charge, because it's going to solve a lot of the problems that we see, people talking over each other, or people monopolizing the meeting. So just make sure that you have one person in charge. And if that person is you, then great. So that's my second recommendation here in this block. And the third one is that you should be clear on setting the rules. I talked about the benefit of having a communication framework here earlier, and that could include, this is kind of an extension of that. So when you're doing an online meeting, I think it's very important that you do set the rules and say, for example, is the video going to be on or off? Are the mics going to be on or off? Are you going to allow questions or not? Is the chat going to be used? Just like we did at the top of this meeting, we actually set the rules, and when people know what the rules are, they're much easier to deal with. In some sense, people are like dogs. If they know what the rules are, it makes them calm. It makes it much easier for them to focus. And an important part of setting the rules and leading the meetings is that you, as the meeting leader, should decide who speaks. And this is great for the speaker, because they know that they have the stage. It's great for the other attendees of the meeting, because they know that it's their turn to be quiet. But it's also important for you as the meeting leader, because it means that you remain in charge of your meeting. And this recommendation of you decide who speaks, it may sound obvious, but if you think about it, it's actually a little bit more powerful than you might imagine initially. Because what does it do when you have the responsibility of deciding who speaks? Well, it solves that first problem that we talked about initially, that people are speaking at the same time, because you make sure that people are not doing that. It also avoids the problem of 2 people out of 15 monopolizing the meeting, because you will then actually make sure that these people are quiet. But I think the third benefit of deciding who speaks is maybe the most powerful, and that is that you have an opportunity to ask the people who usually don't speak. And there's always a couple of people who never say anything in meetings. I'm sure you know these people, but there's an incredible potential in actually asking these people for their opinion. And if you haven't tried this before, actively asking the most quiet people what they think, you are missing out on an enormous opportunity. You can get some amazing ideas from the people who usually don't speak. And there could be whatever reason. Maybe they don't feel so comfortable in the language. Maybe they don't have the same confidence. Maybe they don't have the same presence. Maybe they don't like the sound of their voice. But whatever reason it is, if you want to get the best out of your meeting participants, just ask their opinion. And I think you will be positively surprised. And that will also put the main problem speakers, the people who are monopolizing the meeting, will also put them in their place. So that's definitely an important recommendation. The next tip that I have for you is a very specific technique. And this addresses actually those quiet people, those people who are never speaking up. And this is a technique that I call thought of the day. Thought of the day works like this. At the beginning of every meeting, I ask people to go around and do a round of introductions. I ask you something like this. Please say your name and share one thought of the day. You have 20 seconds. This is a technique that I use in my public speaking club. This is a technique that I use in project meetings at the office as well. So for example, I organized a TEDx conference last year at Johnson & Johnson. Every project meeting, I always started out with thought of the day. Let me share 7 benefits of thought of the day. And I hope that I can convince you to try this technique. The first one is that it does give everybody the chance to speak, avoids that problem where some people are quiet. The second benefit is that you actually identify the people. In almost every meeting, somebody has been new in the team, you have an external consultant, you have a new hire. For whatever reason, not everybody knows everybody. And it's really beneficial that everybody just identifies themselves with their name. The third benefit is, and this is maybe a little bit of an unexpected one, but this technique is actually an amazing informal temperature check. If you ask a question later on in the meeting, does anybody have any issues, any questions? How do you feel about this? That may not be a question that people answer, but when you say, please share one thought of the day, they have an opportunity to really give you an insight about how they're feeling. One person might make a joke. One person might say, oh, I'm having a great day. It's my wife's birthday. But some people might also say, oh, I'm feeling very stressed today. I'm very concerned about this deliverable next week. You never know what kind of information you get from a question like that. But I recommend asking that kind of open question so that you can get an informal temperature check. And in virtual meetings, this is a little bit more important than in physical meetings because we don't have these visual cues to kind of look at people's faces and see how they're actually feeling. So those are 3 benefits. I'm going to go through 4 more benefits of thought of the day. It's your opportunity to take control. Remember, you've only given 20 seconds, and that means that you actually given yourself permission to interrupt, especially those people who are monopolizing the meetings. It's also an amazing opportunity for you to practice, decide who speaks. Like if you're not comfortable interrupting people, this is a great opportunity for you to do so. This technique, in my opinion, is also a great anti-hierarchy device. In this kind of thing, where everybody has 20 seconds, regardless of their rank, regardless of their seniority or their position, they are going to be treated the same. And I think that really nicely breaks down barriers. And especially when you have very high executives where people think that everybody should know who they are, this is a great way to kind of flatten that hierarchy a little bit. And then the final benefit of thought of the day is that it actually builds trust in the team. And remember, that was one of the top concerns that we had with virtual project teams, is that there is that lack of trust. But when people can open up a little bit, it really builds trust in the group. And maybe when you do this the first time, maybe people will only say something very generic, oh, I'm looking forward to today's meeting. But after a while, people start opening up, and you'd be surprised how much more trust and engagement you can build with a technique like that. So that's thought of the day, a very simple thing that you can implement that I've had a lot of success with in real work. I have 2 more tips here in the leadership and communication in virtual meeting tips. And the first one is signposting. In physical meetings, you have all the visual cues. For example, you know that it's somebody else's turn to speak because the leader points at them or somebody walks to the stage. But because you don't have the visual cues, it's much more important that you tell your audience what's going to happen. So this is sometimes called signposting. For example, I said that I'm going to do two more techniques here in a moment. That's an example of signposting. It's much more easy for people to follow along when you signpost. And I recommend using this very explicitly. For example, I might say something, now I'm going to share my screen. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Now I'm going to mute everybody. I'm going to unmute everybody. We're going to let the people in from the breakout room, whatever it may be. Signposting, really important. And this is also true when you're just presenting, when you're not in charge, but you're just presenting. At the end of your speech, you could say, for example, this concludes my speech. I now hand it back over to the meeting chair. Just signpost like this, it makes it so much easier for the meeting leader to follow along and see exactly what's happening. The last little communication and leadership tip that I want to talk about is, or my last recommendation is that you build in some interactive events or elements. You saw, for example, today we talked about the chat at the beginning. That was a nice interactive event that we can do. I also had the polls. I've already done 2 polls. There's going to be 1 more, but that's a great way to engage people, especially when they might be distracted by something else. Every 5 or 10 minutes, do something that requires interaction from your meeting participants. That's going to build that engagement and it's going to give people an excuse to not tune out because they know that something is constantly happening. And that actually brings me to my next poll. And the next topic I want to say just a few words about is video conferencing technology specifically. So the first question is, which device are you using? If you are currently on your laptop, please raise your hand. All right, we got almost everybody on the laptop. If you're on your phone at the moment, please raise your hand. Okay, we got only one person on the phone. Well, if you're on any other kind of device, your desktop or iPad or something like that, please raise your hand. Okay, we got 2 more people on some other device. How about this? Do you have your video conferencing software installed on your phone? Please raise your hand if you have your Zoom or whatever it's installed on your phone. There we go. Okay, a few of you do. For those of you who don't have it installed on your phone, I recommend giving it a go. And there's 2, if we're talking about Zoom specifically, there's 2 great reasons to have it on your phone. One is that the video quality and the audio quality typically on a phone is so much better than your laptop. And the second reason is that it's a great backup. If something goes wrong with your laptop, you can just reach for your phone and just go on there. Because we all have these technological things that happen every now and again. For example, if my setup were to crash right now, I have right here next to me a little phone tripod, and within about 1 minute, I can pop in my phone in there, and then I can continue the video call from there. I also have 4 other backups around the house near me. Here's one, for example. And I probably shouldn't say that because it makes me sound like a crazy person, but at least having 1 level of backup, it is really good for you. It gives you the confidence. If something goes wrong, you can just quickly pop into that one. And the reason why I have these is that these were my primary systems in the past before I started using the setup that I have at the moment. So we talked a little bit about having the backup. And the last topic that I want to talk about is really the use of video explicitly. We saw that one of the main problems in virtual teams is the lack of trust. And I'm reminded of an experiment that was done in the UK, I think 2006 it was published, where they had an office setting and the rule was such that if you wanted to use the tea or coffee or milk in the kitchen, you had to put some coins in a box. And compliance was so-so. And then one day they just pasted the picture of a pair of eyes on the notice board, and the compliance in paying for your tea and coffee more than doubled. And then they took away the eyes and the compliance went down. So just by having a picture of a pair of eyes, just by the impression that you're being seen by somebody, that increased the honesty in this particular test group. And I think with video conferencing, you have the opportunity to do that as well. If you're not certain that you're getting the right answers from your project team, if you're not certain that there is that level of trust in your project team, just try using video, even for a shorter segment. I think it's a great way to build a little bit of trust in your team. And what I actually have found after using a lot of Zoom meetings, I found that people are actually more open in many aspects on Zoom than they are in the real world. And this was not something that I expected to see at all, but people are sharing more personal things, creating much more engagement with the rest of the team on Zoom. And I think that is because it's less frightening to do so when I'm just talking to a camera. I'm not talking to 100 people, I'm just talking to a camera. So especially for the people who are shy, that might be a great tool. So we are now here at 19:35. We're about a half an hour into this, and that was actually the last point that I wanted to make in my prepared remarks. I hope you got some massive value out of some of those tips and you can implement them. So the next stage of our little event here is actually go over to the questions and answers. And for that, I'm going to hand that over to Sabina, but I am going to have to unmute her first. This is just going to take me a moment to find her here. There we go. Okay, because Sabina, I think you're now unmuted. You are our question and answers master. So over to you.
Yes, actually, I wanted to start with sharing my screen again. Should I do that? What do you think?
Yeah, you should absolutely not do that. That is the worst idea I've ever heard.
Oops. I will. I'm not sharing, but anyway, so thank you for this interesting event. I think I should stop sharing it because I'm sharing the wrong one.
But I think you already saw, everybody already saw how that just ruins everything. We were having a nice chat here with actual humans, and then you put it on the screen and it just destroys it.
So it was a good example. And so I'm opening the question and answer session right now. The microphones and the chat are now accessible for everyone. Please click the raise hand icon and I will call on your name to ask your to pose your question. You can also write your question in the chat and I will read it aloud. So anyone who doesn't want to speak, please just use the chat for that. So Marcus, please unmute.
Exactly. I'm gonna
enable the chat.
Exactly. I'm gonna turn off the screen sharing and allow chatting. Okay, chat is now open. You can definitely put your questions in there.
Yes, and I see Thorsten Böhle. Please go ahead. The first hand.
Yes, so sorry for not sharing my screen. I have my kids in the background and I have them much under control at the moment. So my question is, at the moment I'm working 100% in home office and participating in a lot of virtual meetings. So when I look at my schedule for the week, I have the feeling that if my colleagues look also on the schedule and see a free spot, they include an invitation for virtual meetings, and now I'm so absorbed with all the meetings. How do you organize your day in such kind of an environment?
There's actually a hidden feature in like Outlook and other email and calendar clients that a lot of people don't know about. It's the decline button. That's one thing you can do. You can, because you have to be able to respect your own time as well. Just because somebody wants a meeting with you, that doesn't mean you have to accept. And the default is usually an hour, which is almost always too long. So if the person hasn't shown some intentionality with choosing the right length, or for example, there's another clue: is there an agenda in the invite? If there's an agenda in the invite, then it's probably an important meeting. If there's not, then they may not have thought it through.
Yeah. So
I would really encourage the use of that decline button, but that also goes back to the recommendation earlier to have some kind of communication framework. Because it's much more difficult in a virtual environment. In a physical environment, you can just randomly run into people and solve problems, but in a virtual environment, you have to schedule. But I would say respect everybody's time and feel free to decline and come up with a better idea as well.
So what I'm also doing sometimes is including blocking sessions that people are not able to include meetings there. I'm working in a global environment, and this is sometimes hard for people to understand what is really a free time for me and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think by communicating clearly your own expectations, you're not only taking control of your own time, but you're also respecting them, because you're making it easier for them to interact with you by telling you how you want it done.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I see some other hands raised, but I will continue with one question from the chat. So do you have some advice to start a 45-minute session apart from the name and thought of the day?
How to start the session? I think a thought of the day is a good tool, and it doesn't have to be a 20-second, it could be longer. But you could also, of course, ask, what do you hope to get out of this meeting? To do a little check-in question. That's something that I found to be very useful in the past, and it could even be a separate block. To ask, what do you hope to get out of this meeting is a powerful question, because it focuses on the outcomes. Like, it doesn't focus what's on the agenda, it focuses on how is the world going to be different after this meeting. So that would probably be my best recommendation. But in general, just adapt it to what the meeting participants need. Look at what is in their interest, what do they want to get out of it, something like that.
Okay, so the next raised hand would be Angela Rappaccini. Please go ahead. I think you have to unmute yourself first.
See if I can find her in the list.
Oh, no. So we continue with Felix Jimenez. I hope I pronounced the name right.
Yes, perfectly, Sabina. Thank you. Mine, more than a question, are a couple of thoughts where Marcus was giving the introduction. It was a good example, the one that you mentioned as a slides, because I will be honest with you, Marcus. I was waiting a slides as a reference. You were talking about tips, and we are so used to have a slides that we have 4 bullet points. These are the 3 tips that I was a bit anxious. So I guess that this will require a kind of reprogramming for all of us in order to get these tips that rather than having a slide and maybe to say it up front, we need to be more engaged on the verbal thing. So that's one thing that I really thank you, because I was waiting for the slide. So when you put it, I said, finally, now I can make a reference. And the slide has nothing to do with what you were saying. and the other thing is that when you were mentioning about leader, I raised my hand that I said, not in all the meetings that I've been, there is a leader. Of course, there is always a host. The one that organizes the meeting is the host. But this does not necessarily mean that is the leader. It's
Right.
just setting the people together, but then it's not the one that is driving the agenda. So that's a good differentiation between the 2 things. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And the meeting organizer could be an executive assistant who's not even in the meeting. So there's every kind of permutation of that. But let me just say one last thing about slides. Just because, let's say that I have my project dashboard joke slide there. Just because I'm not sharing it on the screen doesn't mean that it cannot be used. A dashboard, for example, that's a great thing that I could just send in an email. I could put it on a Teams site. I could put it on a SharePoint, something like that. So I'm not saying that slides are always terrible, and they can be useful, especially if you want to work on something and get a decision, but it's just not the right tool to display in a virtual meeting. And in our case, there's going to be a recording of this. So if you want to go back to some of the tips, you can just go look at the recording on the YouTube. So the information will still be available. So it's always about looking at what is the right tool for this particular situation.
Okay, I have another question from the chat. Your thoughts on the maximum duration of a virtual meeting?
As short as possible. No, but for real, if you are in online meetings 8 hours a day, you're going to be exhausted. If you're in online meetings for 3 hours, you're going to be exhausted. So just make them as short as possible, and realize that the meeting is not always the right choice. Sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's something else. But just adapt it to whatever makes sense, and don't assume that it has to be 1 hour just because Outlook says by default is 1 hour. So it really depends on the topic.
Okay, next raised hand is Jovile. Please go ahead.
Hi, it's Yovala. Thank you, Marcus.
Sorry.
You have great, excellent tips. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sorry. One thing I was curious if you have any recommendations of how to influence executives to engage audience, because I work within a company where they feel that it's top-down mentality, and they just want to share the information and for individuals to absorb like sponges. Unfortunately, it gets overwhelming and they do tune out, right? Who wants to sit in for an hour or two? Just how do you work with individuals to bring them awareness and say that it is very important to have those, you're saying 5 to 10 minutes, so it might be a stretch, but even if it's 30 minutes, right? How to pause, how to engage for that. I'm curious if you have any examples.
It's certainly a difficult topic, and I've seen different kind of cultures as well. One thing that I liked about Johnson & Johnson, which was an American company where I worked most recently, they had clearly some kind of executive training program on communication, because all of the top executives, they were trained in how to communicate effectively, whereas that is not really always the case. And so it may be a cultural thing, and it may be difficult to do. Ultimately, I would, though, appeal to what's in it for the executives themselves. if they want to present a new strategy, they want people to implement that strategy. If they present a new training, they want people to sign up for the training. So they want to get something out of it. And I think if you can communicate the idea that if you can present this thing in 10 minutes rather than 60 minutes, people are going to be more engaged, and you're actually going to get the results that you're looking for. And that may be taking away some of the information part, putting that in an email, putting that in a newsletter, and just talking about the high touch, high engagement portions of the material. But that's not an easy thing to do, especially when there's this culture of when you're in a position that people should listen. But I think it takes a little bit more. I think it takes a little bit longer. One positive sign that I saw though was that at Actelion, where I was before, the head of HR, he almost never used slides. He was a very nice and engaging people, and people wanted to come and listen to his things. So they also get a nicer audience reaction when they engage in that kind of way. But difficult to say. I don't have a silver bullet for that one, unfortunately. But Sabina, I am conscious of time here a little bit, since we allotted about 10 minutes for Q&A. I wonder if we could do the little closing and summary here, because we're about 10 minutes to 7, and then continue in the open discussion afterwards. What do you think, Sabina?
Okay, it sounds good to me. So we can close, and I will definitely keep the question from the chat, and we can discuss it afterwards. I don't see any further raised hands unless some of the Torsten or Jovile wants to ask another question. But I think, yes, we can definitely close the session now and continue with the discussion afterwards.
Exactly. And so, even though the time slot is until 8, I'm going to be here for as long as there are questions. So don't worry about that. We will definitely get those discussions. But we just have a couple of summary things to get through in the official block, which I'm going to quickly move over to here. So I hope that you guys got some massive value out of some of these communication tips that we talked about today. And I'm going to repeat some of the recommendations, but I'm also going to show you how I didn't only talk about them, but I also showed you. It'll become clear. So for example, one of my recommendations that as the meeting leader, you should set the rules. And I not only told you about that, but I also did it. So for example, I said that the mics were going to be off and chat was going to be off and all of that. I talked about not using any slides, and I, in fact, did not use any slides. I said that we should have some interactive elements throughout the session, and I had these interactive polls. I said that we should have signposting, and we were talking about all the different sections when we're moving ahead, and this is what I did throughout the session as well. And then finally, I mentioned that you can have your video on. But I didn't only ask you to do it, I also gave you an incentive, and I said that if you have your video on, then you can participate in the polls. So I hope that that's a nice little summary of some of the recommendations that we had here. I wasn't able to demonstrate thought of the day because the group is a little bit too big for that. But in general, this is a good practice for communication. Show, don't tell. And for the closing block, I would just like to have a look at what we, let's see. For the closing block, I'd just like to say a few words in general. I think that online communication, virtual teams, these are not going away. Remote working is not going away. Home office is not going away. But the good news is that this is actually a great place for you to start to learn how to become better at all these things. We are not all comfortable with, for example, video conferencing. But it's a great time to learn to be more comfortable with video conferencing. So I would say now is a great time to start to learn about leadership techniques and communication techniques for the virtual environment. And for this reason, if you would like to work with me on that, you can. And for that purpose, I'm actually going to share my screen again. And I'm just going to share my contact details. So if you would like to book me as a speaker or a workshop leader for your company, I have my contact information there. My name is Marcus Seppala. You can write to me at contact@marcuspresents.com. I have my phone number on there as well. And then my website is marcuspresents.com. And if you want to connect with me on social media, there's 2 channels that really work that I think are going to provide a lot of value. On my YouTube channel, I publish regularly videos relating to different ways that you can engage with your audience. And that's whether that's in the comedy club, which is kind of my home stage, or in a professional presentation, or in a virtual meeting like that. So the next video that I'm going to publish, for example, is about video structure. The other place where you can connect with me is on LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, every Monday morning, I publish a communication tip. So for example, the one that I published this Monday was about this phone tripod that I showed you before, how to use that to improve the video quality of your Zoom meetings. So there's a free, like a bite-sized little small communication tip there every Monday. And then if you go to my website, you can go to marcuspresents.com, and there's a little email sign up on the desktop is on the top right, on mobile is at the bottom. And you can sign up for my email list. And there I will send an email about new videos that I publish or live streams that I do. And you can unsubscribe at any point because it's managed by MailChimp, so that also works really well. The final thing here on the screen is actually the QR code. So that QR code there will take you to my website if you'd rather do that. You can also just take a photo or a screenshot there as well. But with that, I'm going to stop the sharing, and I hope to connect with you afterwards. In general, I want to say a big thank you to everybody who participated. I'm so happy to see everybody raising their hands and coming up with good questions. After this, in just a few seconds, I'm going to hand back over to Sabina to do a little formal closing of the official block, and then we're going to do the open discussion for as long as there's battery in my camera. So thank you very much for all your participation today, and back to you, Sabina.
Okay, thank you, Marcus, so much. And I will as well share my screen if you allow it.
Yep, it's done.
1 second, because
after the last share, I had to switch it off. I couldn't take it anymore.
So now we are back again at sharing. Okay, it's here. Okay, so I assume you see the right slide. So actually, we are hoping that you can provide, all attendees can provide some feedback about your experience with today's event. This survey should take no longer than a few minutes to complete, and we will be using your feedback for future improvements of our online events. For the PMI certified attendees, please use this code that is written on the right-hand side to claim your PDU. We will also send out, sorry, that happens as well with, with slides if you're too fast. So we will actually send out the survey code later on as well by email. So actually, I would like to thank Jessamy for her permanent support and the organization of the event in such a short amount of time. We just had 4 weeks to put everything together. So thank you very much, Jessamy. And thank you all on behalf of the organizing team for your attendance. We are so happy that so many people were able to join. And yes, this event will be posted on the PMI Switzerland YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and listen to some recommendations again, go to the PMI YouTube channel and you will find Marcus there. I'm not completely sure when that will happen, but within the next few days. So please stay with us and continue with us the discussion about communication in a virtual environment. The video recording will now be turned off, and I'm handing over again to Marcus.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And now the share screen, the